Welcome to the Hectic Run YouTube channel, everybody. Now that Forza Horizon 5 has been released, I'll be taking a look at the game's graphics settings and how the different levels for each of those settings affect the game's video performance. So this video will be our Forza Horizon 5 graphics settings and optimization guide. I haven't had a chance to play the game much yet because I've been putting this video together, but I can tell you from what little time I've had with it that the visual quality of this game is amazing. If you find this video helpful, give that like and subscribe button a click, and that'll help me bring you more content like this in the future. Let's get started. There's a few important things that I need to note before I get into the benchmarks. First of all, the benchmark in this game doesn't really seem to push the game's graphical capability to its limits, so it's often difficult to see the difference between some settings when you adjust their levels. Sometimes even going from the highest to the lowest level on a setting seems to do nothing. I'm sure there are parts in the game that you will be able to tell the difference, but in the benchmark, sometimes the ability to see the differences between, say, extreme and low on a particular setting is difficult because the function doesn't seem to be utilized heavily in the benchmark. However, I am basing the performance metrics used in this video around the benchmark, as it's the only method I have for benchmarking the game at this time. Second, all of the benchmarks in this video were done on a single NVIDIA 3080 GTX video card with a Ryzen 5600X CPU and 16GB RAM. So there may be some settings where they show little performance difference when you change the levels due to the 3080 having enough horsepower to drive the graphics. However, this might be different for older or less powerful cards. You can still use this video and the charts as a guide for optimizing your game based on the percentage differences when the settings are changed. If I hit 1,000 subs, I'm going to buy 2 new video cards, a lower end card and a mid-range card, so I can test across a higher range of cards. If I get those cards, I'll redo all the benchmarks in this video with the lower cards. This video is also best watched at 4K as it will make it more accurate to inspect the visual comparisons. It's probably going to be difficult to spot the differences at 1080p. Finally, the charts that you see are all shown in the percentage of gain that was achieved by changing the settings, not FPS. So you can easily determine the more taxing settings and change them accordingly. All benchmarks were taken using the in-game benchmark at a resolution of 4K. You can see the general settings that were used on screen now. The graphics settings always stayed the same, except for the one specific setting that I was testing at the time. First up are the game's default graphic profiles. The game has 6 preset profiles: extreme, ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. There's also custom, which lets you turn the graphics settings up to the max levels, even higher than extreme. Extreme, ultra, and high all give you a very high visual experience in this game. There are differences if you know what you're looking for, but most people would be more than happy with either of these 3 settings. Things start to drop down a bit when you get to medium, especially with general scene lighting and object detail, with low and very low being the worst of the 2. It's worth noting, even if your computer can only play this game at low, it's still a fairly nice graphical experience. If you're sitting a little away from your screen, you probably won't notice most things anyway. Performance-wise, choosing the extreme profile over setting all the graphical options to their max gives you a 15% performance increase, ultra gives you a 29%, and high gives you a 45% increase. Medium gives you a 50% performance increase, low 58%, and very low 65%. Given how good the game still looks at high, if you can maintain acceptable frame rates on the high profile, you're still going to have a very good visual experience in this game. I've been running the game on maximum settings, and the frame rate in some areas on my 3080 GTX just isn't really what I want to play it on. These graphical profiles will probably be suitable for most people, so changing between these to find what suits your card is a very simple method to tune the graphics of this game. However, if you want to dive in deeper, keep watching. There's a few settings that make no difference to performance from the testing I did, so I'll list them last. Anisotropic Filtering has 3 options: high, medium, and low. This setting increases the quality of textures on surfaces, especially roads and objects in the distance. There's very minor visual differences between the 3 settings, but you almost have to take a screenshot of the scene and compare it to a screenshot of the same scene on a lower quality setting to see it. Looking at the chart, setting this to the maximum high setting is only a 2% performance hit over low, so I'd recommend setting this to high. Shadow quality is self-explanatory. It's the visual quality of shadows in the game. There's 5 settings: extreme, ultra, high, low, and off. Decreasing this setting lowers the clarity of shadows, with the exception of the off setting, which turns them off altogether. I don't advise playing on off. The game looks broken when you turn the shadows off. Try it. You'll see what I mean. If you look at the fence shadow on the left, you can clearly see the diminishing quality as the shadow setting is turned down. I'm pretty sure this controls the car shadow resolution as well. You can see in the picture that the low car shadow appears to be blurred slightly more than the extreme setting. Lowering the setting from extreme to ultra gives you a 7% performance gain, and there's no extra gain when going from ultra to high. Setting the shadows to low gives you an 8% gain, and turning them off is a 13% gain. I'd recommend using ultra here if your card can handle it. Extreme is nice if you have a really powerful card, as it does make the shadows have the most resolution, but if you want to save some FPS, then ultra still looks pretty good. There's no point using high, as it provides no extra performance gain. Night Shadows has no performance change at all regardless of the setting. This is in the benchmark only. Watch the video half and half and see if you can tell any difference. If you look at the start of the race, right where it says go, I feel like there's a difference between the shadows on the headlights. They appear to be softer compared to off, where they appear to just be very loud and bright. Not 100% sure. This setting will most likely have more of an effect on performance in the game at night, but in the benchmark it has no effect. Environmental texture quality sets the texture quality of most of the environmental objects in the game. There's 5 settings: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. Ideally, you want to try and turn this up as high as possible to get the best general visual texture quality out of the game. It's difficult to see the difference between extreme and ultra. However, when you go from ultra to high, you can clearly see a big jump down in texture quality. Medium and low get even worse. If you look closely at trees in the comparison video, you can clearly see the difference. Changing this setting from extreme to ultra gives you a 2% performance gain, but when you lower this setting to high, you get a 13% performance gain. Medium and low give no performance benefit, so it's pointless using those settings. I'd recommend using the extreme option if your card has the VRAM to handle it, but if your card doesn't have enough VRAM, then use high. Only set this below high if your card is running out of VRAM while you're playing. Environmental geometry detail has 6 settings: extreme, ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. Not 100% on all of the functions of this setting, but I can tell you that it definitely puts less people in the crowd. If you pause the areas in the video where you can see crowds, it's very clear that the lower you go, there's definitely less people in the scene. I'm not sure if the people have a lower visual quality as well, but there's definitely not as many people in the crowd. Performance-wise, if you drop the setting from extreme to ultra, you gain a 5% performance increase. Dropping to high gets you 7%, medium, low, and very low give you basically no performance increase. I recommend using high for this, as it still maintains a fairly decent sized crowd. On low and very low, the crowd gets very thin. MSAA. Multi-sampling anti-aliasing. This takes care of jagged edges on 3D objects. There's 4 settings for MSAA: off, 2x, 4x, and 8x. When you're running at 4K resolution, jagged edges are less noticeable, but at lower resolutions, this setting will definitely help to take away the jaggies from your game objects. If you look at the back windscreen of the car and the black window frame, you can clearly see the difference between all settings. The only option that I would say doesn't look so great is off. 8x obviously looks the best, and it's almost impossible to see jagged edges at 4K 8x MSAA, but it does have a hefty GPU requirement. Dropping this setting from 8x to 4x gives you a 7% performance increase. Dropping to 2x gives you a total 14% performance boost over 8x. Turning it off altogether gives you a 19% performance increase. I don't recommend turning this setting off. You want to run this at 2x minimum. If your card has the power, then set it to 4x. I'd avoid 8x unless you have a top of the range GPU. FXAA. This is another anti-aliasing method that smooths out jagged edges on 3D objects in the game. FXAA tends to blur the edges of objects to achieve this. If you find a spot in the video where the car is split in the middle of the screen, use the back windscreen frame as a guide again. You can just make out the slightly blurred edge compared to the side that it's turned off on. It's a very minor difference. This setting will probably be more noticeable on lower resolutions. As you can see from the chart, turning this setting on only drops performance by 1%. I recommend turning this on. Screen Space Ambient Occlusion, or SSAO, has 3 settings: off, high, and ultra. This setting deals with lighting and the way light reacts to objects that are in the path of the light. Basically, if a light is obstructed by an object in the scene, it calculates where the light should and shouldn't show based on the objects blocking its path. Let's say there's a car headlight and a box in front of the headlight. The light you see on the ground should be partially blocked by the box. Park your car in front of a bunch of trees at night and watch how the light is blocked by the objects. This setting controls that function. SSAO is a nice setting for very little resources. Turning this off only gains a 2% performance increase. Set it to ultra and be done with it. Reflection quality has 6 settings: extreme, ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. This controls the quality of the reflections in the game. Things like reflections off your car, water, etc. The reflections in this game are really nice, especially when you go to the inside of your car view where you can see only the hood of your car. Hop into a black car, set it to the hood view and drive around and look at the hood of your car. Nice reflections. This option sets the quality of those reflections. Extreme and ultra results are pretty much the same. Things start to drop a little on high. Medium gets noticeably lower. Low, the reflections start to look a lot worse. And very low, there are a lot of reflections that don't show compared to higher settings, and what does show is lower quality. The performance of reflections changes very little to none between settings. Extreme, ultra, high, and medium all have the same performance. You gain 3% performance when setting to low and 7% when you set it to very low. I recommend using extreme on this setting. World car level of detail has 5 settings: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. It basically does what the name says. It controls the level of detail of all the cars in the game. You want to keep this as high as possible because the cars really are the core of this game. Using the Corvette badge as a reference point, it's very hard to see any difference between extreme and ultra. On high, you can see the clarity is starting to drop off significantly, and we lost some reflections on the Corvette badge. Medium and low, the clarity of the rendered details gets even lower. The performance difference between extreme and ultra is 0%, so there's no reason to use ultra over extreme. High gives you a 3% performance increase. Medium also gives a 3% performance increase over extreme, so there's no reason to use medium over high. Low gives a 5% performance increase. I recommend setting this to high if you're on a mid-range card. If you have a high-range card, go for extreme. SSR has 5 settings: extreme, ultra, high, low, and off. It's another reflection setting that controls what reflections you actually see. The reflection quality setting that we spoke about earlier controls the quality of these reflections. This setting controls what actually gets reflected. This setting adds quite a nice level of realism to the game. There's a 3% gain to be had by switching from extreme to ultra. You get no extra gain by going to high. Low gains you a 5% increase, and it's the same 5% when turning this setting off. I recommend ultra if your car can handle it. Lens effects has 4 settings: ultra, high, medium, and off. Lens effects deals with things that you see that give you the impression that you're looking through a lens. For example, the water droplets that you see on the screen when it's wet. It makes it feel like you're looking through a lens into the world. It's a small detail that adds to the immersion. Ultra and high are very hard to tell any difference. When you get to medium, the droplets on screen appear to be slightly more blurred, and off turns these off altogether. There's a 2% gain to be had going from ultra to medium, 3% when you set it to low, and a 5% gain by turning this off. If you look at the video side by side, it's really hard to tell any difference. I recommend medium. Shader quality. Shaders are basically just that. They're a program that's in control of shading pixels within the game. There's 5 settings: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. Shaders control the level of light, darkness, and color that ends up being rendered onto pixels. This setting will have an effect on the quality of lighting overall in the game. Extreme and ultra look very similar, but when you get down to high, you can clearly see less light being rendered into scenes. It takes away from the warmth of the game scene, especially at night. You get a 2% performance increase going from extreme to ultra, 3% when you switch to high, 6% on low, and 7% when you turn them off. I'd aim for ultra if you have a more powerful card. The difference can be quite significant in the warmth of lighting. High is only a 1% gain over ultra. I feel like everyone should try ultra, but if you really need more FPS, then you can sacrifice down to low for an extra 3%. Particles are used to create effects like smoke from your tires, water effects when driving on wet roads, dust from driving on dirt roads, and the sandy effect when you're inside the sandstorm. Particles are used throughout the game, and the effect can be really nice. This is one of those options where the difference between the setting in the benchmark is 0 between all settings. However, I can tell you that this will definitely have a performance hit in-game. The benchmark has conveniently left large amounts of particles out of it. As you can see in the video, the different settings level for particles produces less tire smoke as you lower it. Also within the dust storm, the dusty effect is less the lower you go. When you turn particle effects to very low, inside the dust storm breaks. Basically, if you find your card starts chugging along when you enter the dust storm, or when you start smoking up your tires, you might want to lower the particle settings. Medium is a nice balance, so I recommend aiming for at least medium if your card can handle it. Low if your card's struggling, but try to avoid very low at all costs. It really takes away from the game when it's turned off. So I skipped motion blur because there's basically no motion blur in the benchmark, so this setting doesn't make any difference regardless of the level that you set it to. Deformable terrain quality I also skipped because in the benchmark there's not really deformable terrain shown much. This will have an effect in game, and this controls anything that you can break basically. Fences, trees, etc. RTX/ray tracing I skipped because this is only enabled when you're in Forza Vista character viewing your car, it does nothing in general gameplay. This game doesn't have any RTX effects in the general gameplay. So that just about does it for my Forza Horizon 5 settings and optimization guide. I hope this video helps some of you to get your game running well and looking nice. It's fairly time consuming doing all this testing, so I figured I'd do it and share this for everyone in hope that it might save you guys some time. Small parting note about the benchmark mode. I feel like there's a lot of graphical elements within the game that were left out of the benchmark. For example, particles like smoke on the tires, sandstorms, particles, destructive environments, large amounts of nighttime lights. These settings, when you change them in the benchmark, have basically zero effect from ultra to low/off. If you look at the benchmark, it's a very isolated benchmark. It doesn't have a lot of effects. It's a race with very controlled view into the distance, almost like it's made to not really stress your card too much so you can get a better result. It's not a big deal, it just would have been nice to have a benchmark that really put all of the settings through their paces, so it would make developing a nice testing video a bit less of a tedious task. I'll be making another video after this one which goes into a lot more detail about each setting and what things in the game it affects rather than in the benchmark mode. That video will have a lot more in-game footage and hopefully be able to show the different quality settings and how they relate to various objects in the game for real rather than in the benchmark. I'll spend a little while playing the game first, but that video is coming in the near future. If this video has been helpful to you, then it would really help me make more videos like this if you hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching and see you all next time.